All right, welcome in everyone to our deep dive all about the UK tax system. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on your materials that you sent in.
Oh, cool.
So we have this business school document, and taxes, they're not always the most exciting thing to talk about.
Right.
But this is actually really interesting stuff in this document.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, we're going to get into some really interesting facts, some surprising stuff too.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of times people, they see taxes as like this big burden, but they're really kind of the foundation of, how society works.
Oh, for sure.
They fuel, everything from schools to
Oh, I guess
healthcare.
roads.
Yeah, infrastructure.
All that stuff, yeah.
Stuff we use every day.
Exactly. And, a big part of that is, like how taxes can kind of redistribute wealth and address inequality.
Yeah, governments also use them to, influence behavior.
Oh, right, like sin tax.
Yeah, tobacco, alcohol, things like that.
Okay, so this document breaks down the UK tax system into two main categories, direct and indirect.
Okay.
Can you kind of explain the difference between those two?
Yeah, so direct taxes are levied on income and profits directly.
Like when they take it right out of your paycheck?
Exactly. So, income tax is a great example of that.
That pay.
Yeah, pay.
Okay.
And then indirect taxes are levied on goods and services.
So like VAT?
Yeah, VAT's a big one.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I bought my first car. That VAT was crazy how much extra it was.
Yeah, it can be surprising how much it adds up.
Yeah, all right. So let's dive a little deeper into the direct taxes. What are some examples besides just the income tax?
Well, you have corporation tax, which is on company profits.
Okay.
Capital gains tax on, if you make a profit selling like a property or shares.
Okay.
Inheritance tax, which is applied to the value of your estate when you pass away.
Oh, wow.
And then there's national insurance contributions, which is kind of a tricky one
Okay.
because it's not technically a tax, but it kind of acts like one.
Okay, so it goes to the government still.
Yeah, it funds state benefits, the NHS,
Gotcha.
unemployment support.
Okay, and what about some more examples of indirect taxes?
So, we talked about VAT, but there's also excise duties,
Okay.
which are on things like, fuel, alcohol, and tobacco.
Oh, that's right.
They're also kind of a sin tax.
Okay.
They discourage consumption of certain goods.
I always wondered how effective those are.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky question. Studies show that it can reduce consumption, especially, among people who are sensitive to price changes, like young people.
Okay.
But, there's also that ethical question.
Right, like should the government be influencing behavior like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so now the document also talks about this distinction between capital taxes and revenue taxes.
Okay.
I've always found this to be kind of confusing.
Yeah, I can see how that would be.
So can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, so capital taxes are taxes on your wealth and your assets.
Okay.
So, like, if you sell a house,
Okay.
make a big profit, that's where you'd see capital gains tax.
Okay.
Inheritance tax is also considered a capital tax.
Okay.
Revenue taxes are on income and spending.
So like ongoing income.
Yeah, things like income tax, corporation tax, and VAT.
So capital taxes are kind of like a snapshot of your wealth,
Right.
and revenue is more like a continuous stream.
Exactly.
Okay, so businesses have to navigate this tax world too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the things that they have to consider?
Well, corporation tax rates are a big factor for businesses when they're
Mhm.
making investment decisions.
Okay.
Sometimes governments can offer incentives,
Oh, interesting.
like tax breaks to attract investment to certain area.
Right, like if they want to bring more businesses to a certain area.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then also the type of business structure, sole proprietorship, partnership, limited company, all of that has tax implications.
Oh, wow. So many things to think about.
Yeah, it can get pretty complex.
Speaking of complex, the document talks about the UK tax system as being multi-tiered.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
So it's kind of like a layer cake.
Okay.
You have the central government, they levy taxes like income tax, VAT, corporation tax.
Okay.
That funds national programs.
Gotcha.
And then you have devolved governments in Scotland and Wales.
Okay.
And they have their own, little twists on some taxes.
Okay, so it's not just one big tax pot.
No, it goes to different levels.
Okay.
And then you have local governments with council tax.
Wow, so where do all these tax rules come from?
Well, it starts with legislation, acts
Okay.
of parliament. Those establish the framework for all the different taxes.
Okay.
But then you have statutory instruments,
Okay.
which are like the fine print.
Okay, so it's like the details.
Yeah, all the details. And then
Okay.
there's case law,
Okay.
which is court decisions
Gotcha.
that interpret the law in specific situations.
So it's like a living system that's constantly evolving.
Right.
Okay, so how do we even keep up with all this?
Well, thankfully, HMRC provides a lot of guidance.
Okay, HMRC, who are they?
That's Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs.
Okay.
They're the tax authority in the UK.
Okay, so they're like the rule keepers.
Yeah,
Okay.
they make sure everyone understands the rules and that everyone's playing by the rules.
So they're not just like the big bad enforcers.
No, they provide support and guidance as well.
Okay, so let's talk about self-assessment.
Okay.
This is where things start to get real for individuals and businesses.
Yeah, it's a big part of the UK system.
Okay.
It means you're responsible for calculating your own tax liability
Wow.
and filing a return to HMRC.
Okay, so accurate record keeping is pretty important then.
Oh, absolutely crucial.
Okay.
Because if HMRC decides to audit you,
Oh, right.
you need to be able to back up your claims.
Okay, but luckily everything's digital now. So.
Yeah, you don't need those shoe boxes full of receipts anymore.
Right.
There's software that can help you track everything.
Okay, so what about people that don't have to do self-assessment?
So most employed people don't.
Okay.
Because their income tax is deducted through pay.
Right, pay as you earn.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does the self-assessment process work?
Well, you file an annual tax return
Okay.
that details all of your income, expenses, and the tax you owe.
Okay.
And there are deadlines.
Okay, got to get those deadlines.
Right. If you miss them, there are penalties.
Oh, man. Scary.
Yeah, it's important to stay on top of it.
Okay, so HMRC offers something called payments on account.
Right.
What is that?
So those are advance payments towards your income tax.
Okay.
It helps you avoid a big bill at the end of the year.
Right.
They're based on your previous year's tax liability.
So you're kind of estimating how much you'll owe.
Yeah.
Okay, and how do you make these payments?
You usually make two payments, one by January 31st and the other by July 31st.
Okay.
And then there's a balancing payment at the end.
Oh, okay, to make up the difference.
Yeah, if you underpaid or overpaid.
Okay, so companies have to do self-assessment too, right?
They do.
Okay.
They file something called a corporation tax return,
Okay.
and they have to use a digital format called IXBRL.
Oh, so it's all electronic.
Yeah, much more efficient than paper.
Makes sense.
And they have a longer deadline,
Okay.
12 months after the end of their accounting period.
Okay, so we talk about deadlines being important.
Yes, very important.
What happens if you miss one?
Well, there are penalties.
Okay.
Late filing penalties start at £100,
Wow.
and then there's interest charged on any overdue tax.
So it can really add up.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Okay, so record keeping is super important.
Absolutely vital.
Okay.
You need to keep records for at least 6 years for companies,
Oh, okay.
5 years for the self-employed,
Gotcha.
and 12 months for employed persons.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of paperwork.
It can be, but again, digital tools make it much easier.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
You can track everything electronically.
Okay, so what are HMRC compliance checks?
So HMRC has the power to check up on you.
Okay.
They want to make sure you're paying the right amount of tax.
Okay.
Sometimes they do random checks,
Okay.
but often it's based on risk assessment.
Okay, so if you have a complex tax situation, you might get checked.
Right, or if you make a lot of money,
Okay.
or if you're in a high-risk industry.
Gotcha. So what happens during a check?
They'll usually contact you in writing
Okay.
and ask for more information
Gotcha.
or documentation.
Okay.
There are two types of checks, aspect inquiries and full inquiries.
Okay, break those down for me.
So aspect inquiries are just focused on a specific part of your return.
Okay.
Maybe they have a question about a certain deduction.
Okay.
And then full inquiries are a review of your entire tax situation.
Oh, wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it can be.
So what happens if you disagree with HMRC?
You can appeal.
Okay, so it's not like their word is final.
No, there's a process.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, the first step is an internal review within HMRC.
Okay.
You can present your side of the story.
Okay.
And then if you're still not happy,
Yeah.
you can appeal to the first-tier tribunal.
Oh, okay, so it's like going to court.
Kind of.
Okay.
It's less formal than court,
Okay.
but their decision is legally binding.
Okay, so what are some examples of penalties that HMRC can impose?
Well, we talked about the late filing penalties.
Okay.
But there are also penalties for late payment, incorrect returns,
Okay.
and even tax evasion.
Wow. So there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, it's important to take it seriously.
All right, so before we move on to the next part, I just want to ask, is the UK tax system too complex?
It's definitely complex,
Yeah.
but you know that complexity comes from trying to achieve multiple objectives,
Right.
like fairness, efficiency, and promoting certain social goals.
Okay, so it's a balancing act.
Yeah, it's tough to get it right.
And what about the argument that it's too burdensome?
That's a valid concern.
Okay.
You know, the UK's tax burden is actually in line with other developed countries,
Okay.
but there's always room for improvement.
Okay.
We need to make sure that it's competitive
Right.
while also funding essential services.
So it's a delicate balance.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we move on to the next part, I want to leave you with a thought. How could we ensure that the UK tax system remains fair, efficient, and responsive in the years ahead? That's something to think about, and we'll pick it up next time.
Okay, sounds good. So we were talking about some of the challenges facing the UK tax system.
Right, like how do we keep it, up to date,
Exactly. The world is changing so fast.
especially with technology and everything?
Right, like the digital economy.
Okay.
It's a big challenge for tax systems.
How so?
Well, businesses operate across borders now.
Okay.
It's hard to track where their profits are.
Right, so how do you tax them?
Exactly. It's a big debate right now.
Okay, so what's the UK doing about this?
Well, they've been pretty active in trying to address it.
Okay.
One example is the diverted profits tax.
Okay, what's that?
It's sometimes called the Google tax.
Oh, interesting.
It's aimed at preventing companies from shifting their profits to low-tax countries.
So they have to pay their fair share in the UK.
Exactly.
But that must be hard to enforce.
Oh, it's a constant challenge. It requires a lot of international cooperation.
Right, because these companies are global.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's talk about Brexit.
Okay.
That's obviously had a big impact on the UK.
Oh, huge.
Has it affected the tax system?
It definitely has.
Okay.
The UK is not bound by EU tax rules anymore, so they have more freedom to set their own policies.
It's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, there are pros and cons.
Right, like more control, but also more uncertainty.
Exactly.
Okay, so what does all this mean for individual taxpayers?
Well, the main thing is to stay informed.
Okay.
Tax laws are always changing.
Okay.
So you got to keep up with the latest developments.
So like subscribe to newsletters and stuff?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Also, HMRC is moving towards a digital tax system.
Oh, okay.
So you need to be prepared for that.
So no more shoeboxes.
No, everything's going digital.
Okay, so what are the benefits of a digital system?
Well, it can be more efficient,
Okay,
less prone to errors,
makes sense.
and it improves communication
Okay,
between taxpayers and HMRC.
okay. So it's good for everyone.
Yeah, it's the way of the future.
Okay, well, at the end of the day, it's all about people, right?
Of course.
Like, how do we want to fund our society?
Exactly. It's about our values and priorities.
Right, so this business school document,
Yeah.
it's not just about the technical stuff.
Right.
It's about the bigger picture.
Exactly.
So if you could change the UK tax system, what would you do?
Well, that's a tough question.
Yeah,
I think I'd focus on simplicity and fairness.
okay, those are good goals.
Yeah, I'd want to make it easier for people to understand
Okay,
and comply with the rules,
okay.
but also make sure it's progressive.
So the more you earn, the more you contribute.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any specific areas you'd reform?
Well, income tax allowances and deductions,
Okay,
they're really complicated.
I can imagine.
It would be good to simplify those.
Yeah, that would make things easier.
Yeah, and fairer, too.
Okay, so we need to think about social and economic challenges too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like how can the tax system help with those?
Well, we could use tax incentives to
Yeah.
encourage things like renewable energy,
Right.
affordable housing,
Right.
support for small businesses.
Yeah, those are good ideas.
We need to be creative,
Right.
but we also have to be careful.
How so?
Well, changes can have unintended consequences.
Oh, right, like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Okay, so we need to think things through carefully.
Yes, very carefully.
Okay, so it's all about finding that balance.
Right, between achieving our goals
Okay.
and avoiding negative side effects.
Okay, so the UK tax system is always evolving.
It has to
Right.
keep up with the world.
Okay, so what's the takeaway message here?
Well, we all have a role to play
Okay.
in shaping the future of taxation.
Right, by being informed and engaged.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Basics to the big picture.
Yeah, it's been a deep dive.
Okay, so what's the final question we should be asking ourselves?
Well, how can we ensure that the UK tax system remains fair, efficient, and responsive in the years to come?
That's a good one.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah, but it's an important one.
Definitely something I think about.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into the UK tax system.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we really have.
But, I think these documents that you brought
Yeah,
have been a really good starting point.
right. It's not just about the numbers. It's about the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about people.
Yeah, like how do we as a society want to fund our priorities?
Right. How do we make things fair?
Exactly. So,
If you had a magic wand,
okay.
what would you change about the UK tax system?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. I think I would focus on making it a little bit simpler,
Yeah, I think that's a common one.
right? But also like keeping it fair.
Right. Finding that balance
Exactly.
between simplicity and fairness.
Yeah, so are there any specific areas that you think,
Oh, there are definitely some areas that are more complex than others.
okay, like what?
Well, income tax allowances and deductions,
Okay.
those are a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Even for tax professionals.
Yeah, so maybe simplifying those rules.
Yeah, make them more transparent.
Yeah, that would be good.
It would make things a lot easier.
Yeah, and probably fairer too.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about making it simpler, but we also need to think about the bigger social and economic challenges.
Right, like how can the tax system actually address those issues?
Exactly. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing we could do is use tax incentives
Okay.
to encourage certain behaviors.
Like what?
Well, things like investing in renewable energy
Okay.
or promoting affordable housing
Right. Those are all important.
and supporting small businesses.
Yeah, especially in areas that need it. So
Exactly.
those are all good ideas.
We need to be creative,
Right.
think outside the box,
Yeah.
but we also need to be cautious
Okay, how so?
because any changes we make
Yeah.
could have unintended consequences.
Oh, right, like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
So we need to be very thoughtful.
Very careful.
Okay, so it's all about finding that balance.
Finding that sweet spot.
Exactly, where we achieve our goals.
Yeah, and avoid negative side effects.
Okay, so the UK tax system, it's not set in stone, right?
No, it's always evolving.
Which is a good thing, I
It
guess.
has to adapt to the changing world.
Exactly. So I think the main takeaway here
Yeah.
is that we all have a responsibility,
Yes, to be informed
right, to understand the system.
and to engage in the conversation.
Exactly, because ultimately it affects all of us.
It shapes our society.
Well, I think this deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
I've learned a lot.
Me too, and I hope our listeners have as well.
Yeah, it's a complex topic,
It really is.
but it's important to understand.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Sounds good.